My name is Jeanne Jones, and I currently lead community and customer marketing at Amperity. Before that, I led direct marketing and guest experience and design at Alaska Airlines, where I was actually a customer of Amperity's and loved the product so much I joined the company. Just a little bit about Amperity before we dive in. We are the #1 B2C enterprise customer data platform, and we are trusted by the world's most loved brands. Brands that believe that they can accelerate their growth by focusing on their customer and their customer data. We've revolutionized the way that brands identify, understand, and connect with their customers by using AI and delivering a comprehensive customer 360. This unified view really helps marketing performance, fuels customer insights, and enables real-time world-class customer experience. With Amperity, the technical teams are freed from managing the data and able to unlock that data for their business counterparts so that they can drive marketing activations and insights. We work with brands such as Kroger, Michaels, Lucky Brand, Kendra Scott, Alaska Airlines, Tapestry, First Hawaiian Bank, and many more. You can always go to amperity.com. But today, we will be talking with Daria, the Chief Marketing Officer of JustFab. We'll be discussing the importance of knowing and understanding your customer and evolving with them to drive loyalty and how data plays a part in all of this. Daria is responsible for JustFab's global brand awareness and positioning and overseeing all the marketing functions and channels and geographies. Prior to joining JustFab, Daria was one of the 10 founding members of Rent the Runway, which I'm a huge fan of as well. So welcome, Daria. Thanks so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I didn't expect Rent the Runway to come up in there. It's been quite some time, but yeah, a really, really fun time in my career and an amazing business model that has definitely evolved with the customer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And when you joined JustFab, my understanding is that you were joining at a time of transformation and really driving that. And it's your 10-year anniversary recently. So I was hoping you can just share a little bit about what this means to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying that my thoughts on transformation back in 2019 when I joined have certainly expanded.
Right.
Because I made the move to LA from New York, where I had been at Facebook for several years. And so for me at the time coming in, and this is still very much true, the idea of transformation was really driven by, if we think about the last decade, it really met the market desire for creating digital first D2C companies and businesses that were game changing in customer acquisition and doing so efficiently, doing so at scale online. I think this next decade is really going to push all of us as marketers forward in terms of how does loyalty, how does brand, how do those opportunities now stand at the center of our strategies, and making sure that we're thinking about making the right investments in brand and in retention as much as we've done in acquisition. So when I think about transformation at the macro level, that's where my head is. When I zoom into what we're doing at JustFab as a result, it really is very much starting with the customer and having a laser focus on the customer, on our brand values, which we've spent the last year and a half or so re-articulating and getting very clear on. And then ultimately, how do those two things together empower, what we offer and drive what we offer. And so, the transformation that we've been going through has been, as I mentioned on the brand side, very much an exercise in our value proposition and our overall image, our voice, our visual signature, and therefore the creative execution of all of that on pretty much every surface. And then for sure, partnering with the right storytellers to amplify that message and making sure that we're reaching her in the right channels and in the most resonant way. And I think, part of the transformation that happens when you are a business that launched, when we did, And with such an innovative model at the time, it was incredibly novel to have fashion membership back in 2010. And so how does our product design evolve, our merchandise strategy evolve? How does the ways in which we reach and engage customers, both in terms of acquisition and then on the retention and loyalty side, how do those things evolve? So I would say transformation for us pretty much lives in those three spaces, and it's not necessarily net new in terms of our broader strategy, but it really is the places where we've just got to be very finely tuned, really clear on how we're showing up and what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's interesting because as you're evolving your business, your customers evolving too, particularly those customers that have been with you since day one, because they've likely grown up with you, gone from the classroom to the office to potentially being, motherhood or what have you. So I'm really wondering, like, how are you evolving with your customers? How are you able to know when they're moving life stages and how you show up with that?
It's interesting. We have at Textile a portfolio of companies, obviously, one of them being Fab Kids, which is our kids brand. So in a way, it's really amazing to be able to observe how her life stages evolves, particularly in that instance, in that example. But it's true, we have the ability to attract and hopefully retain customers who can then grow up with us. I think the versatility in our offering and the breadth of our assortment allows for us to be able to do that, and to continue to focus on that. And there's always a mix of, and I think this is going to be true for any marketer, pretty much any category, where you have your iconic hero styles. Those will evolve over time. You have your trend moments, your fashion moments that may be a little bit more fleeting and are very much about the moment and fun. Maybe there's something that's happening in the culture that's driving how trends are being shaped, and then you're going to have your kind of your loss leaders, right? And I think every business to some extent, that was true for me at Estee Lauder and at Lancome, YSL, right? And it's true in this world of fast fashion footwear. And so with all of that, really having clarity on how each of your parts of your assortment or your offering, what role do they play in the strategy? So I would say for us, that's always been true, that we've optimized for breadth and versatility. We absolutely want to be able to be a one-stop shop for her and to give her shoes to live her life in, whatever her life looks like. When we think about the customer profile, it's tempting to want to go very quickly into demographics. I think what we've seen with the collapsing of distribution, of how people consume content and media and inspiration, I think that it can be dangerous to rely too much on just demographics and specifically age, right, as an indication of the customer. So we think about our customer personas more in the relationship to fashion that she may have, right? And so there are just going to be a group of women who are really style seeking and they want advice, and they really are going to prioritize equally comfort and looking chic, and they want to be able to balance the two. She might be a mom. She may just have an active lifestyle that demands that of her, and her wardrobe needs to fit that for her. There's absolutely the woman for whom fast fashion is not fast enough. She wants the latest trends, right? And she wants it at the speed of her Instagram feed. And so we think about her very differently. And again, I know women who fit that profile and have that relationship to fashion, who span, multiple, generations or decades, and then we have the women who we call our mixologist, who is that woman who's probably mixing high and low. Maybe she has pieces that she really loves, or they were investment pieces. Maybe they were great vintage finds, and she's looking to complement them with new pieces and remix them, as the seasons go by. So I think that for us, it's really important to think about our customer through a multi-dimensional lens. For sure, you're going to have demographic insight, information, change of locations, and all of the things that we're able to allow our algorithms to then think about showing her sandals in February because she lives in Miami or, maybe LA, right? And making sure that we're showing boots to our customers in Chicago and New York. But beyond that, really understanding her relationship to fashion, how she wants to incorporate what her footwear especially, looks like in her day-to-day life.
So are you really leaning into the use of analytics and data when you're making these decisions? You talked a little bit about algorithms, and I'm wondering what your data science team looks like and how much you're using that to drive a lot of the business that you're talking about.
Well, it's funny because when you're in the fashion business, you have to be in the business of the art of it because it's tactile, it's so personal, it's so emotional. We all care about what we're wearing and where we're wearing it and what it says about us or how it allows us to express ourselves in a moment. And yet, as a D2C company that was created with, I think, the very strong belief that we could eliminate the middleman in a lot of ways to cut costs, pass those savings on to our customers, and to use data to really power and help, reimagine the fashion industry. We absolutely have data at the center of everything that we do. And so I gave the one example of, how a customer based on where she lives may see different merchandise and see really key styles or, top performing trends in her market. And so that's going to be true in potentially in the emails that she receives and then her experience on our website. But, we also are looking at sell-through data. We're looking at the breadcrumbs she's leaving us along the way on the site. We're looking at social data to understand where we're getting a lot of velocity, whether it's from a content perspective or from certain styles. It's interesting. You'll see that certain styles may be really resonant on Instagram, but then on YouTube, people are really into something else. And then on Facebook, they're into yet again a different style. So even just understanding, where we're seeing a lot of energy and excitement for different types of merchandise. How do you lean into that? What are people searching for, right? Are there gaps that we're not filling because we're seeing, search results are yielding in high bounce rates, right? So we are consciously thinking very much about the data as much as we are thinking about the sort of the art that also has to accompany the science that we use to power the business. And, it's fun. I think the temptation is to maybe consume too much data, right? And so for us, it's really about being surgical and clear about which, KPIs matter, what data sets matter, and not getting too mired in that at the same time. It's a fine balance.
Yeah, I think marketing is definitely an art and a science at the same time, with the data and the creative at the intersection of it for sure. And so thinking about this last year and how impactful this has been, particularly on women, and tell me a little bit about what are some of the changes that you saw. And now that we're looking at reopening, which is super exciting, how is that evolving, and has it kind of messed up your data or made it more complicated for you to think about forecasting?
Well, I will say, if our chief merchandise and design officer were here, she may have a slightly different view on this. So I won't pretend to represent her perspective. I can say for sure that we both had a moment where we had to sort of hold hands and take some risks, especially in the earlier days of the pandemic, the earlier months. Our buys for the fall season were done. And to some extent, even coming into winter. So where we had to be swift and as much as we could agile was on chase. And so where could we chase into what was doing really well? Obviously, we went from a very shoe-focused customer to someone who immediately was dressing from the waist up and, then looking for cozier knits and sweaters and, blouses and tops, or if she was buying things for her lower body, they were leggings and slippers and maybe, some sneakers and some flats if she was running out of the house, maybe to walk the dog or, something like that. So we absolutely had to quickly understand where we saw the customer going and then pivot. Obviously, we brought masks in pretty quickly, realizing that that was now a part of her wardrobe. It was something she had to think about, and we wanted to be able to offer that to her as well. I think what's been interesting is what I was calling Hope Couture, I would say, maybe 7 or so months ago, where we did start to see interest in heels again. And she was starting to imagine, you could tell she was imagining a world after the pandemic and after the shelter in place orders have been lifted and we had more freedom to move about the world again. We did see that for sure. I think what's to be seen and what we're really keeping an eye on is the balance of the two. I do think that there are some folks who are either going to continue to work from home and have a still, maybe a heavier remote life. And so meeting their needs may look different than what it used to. You're going to have folks who in general just want to stay comfortable and stay cozy, right? And so how do you now envision apparel that can take her from lounging at home out into the world, and she can actually, be seen in something that still feels pretty comfy, but a little bit less like jammies. And then, you have the woman who's, I think, craving structure. Her day was unstructured, her wardrobe felt unstructured, and everything was loose. And I think she's definitely looking to get dressed up again, be buttoned up again, put a little bit more polish on it. I think we're seeing the range. I think what's to be determined is how much distribution you see of those different characteristics or profiles in the merchandise. But we're betting on a return to fashion in a big way, and we're excited about it, and seeing folks getting dressed up. Pumps and heeled sandals are huge for us now, and in that sort of 1 and 2 spot in terms of categories within footwear. And so I think the customer has made it clear that she intends to get dressed up again and head back out into the world. But yeah, it was, I would say there were probably 4 or 5 months where we were keeping a really close eye on everything, and trying to, as quickly as we could, pivot. We were selling out of sports bras and leggings at a rate that we just couldn't have imagined.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the Hope Couture is turning into something that is becoming reality and not just hope, which is fantastic. And another thing that you've invested in is leading with style. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your investment in that and how that ties back to your customer and your business strategy.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking. It really is a passion endeavor of mine and of my team. When we spent the early months in 2020 starting to dig deep into our brand architecture, re-articulate our brand values and beliefs, one of the things that surfaced for us as a women-led brand with a majority female customers that is also typically known for being what I would call stereotypically or sort of culturally feminine. We wanted to honor that even as the brand continues to evolve. And we really got excited about this belief that shoes may not change the world, but the women who wear them will. And how, therefore, thank you. And so how, therefore, does that belief manifest? We have the opportunity as a brand to work with some really incredible influencers, fashion influencers, beauty, sometimes, lifestyle. And this was a place to pivot a little and work with women of influence. And so leading with style for us is a platform where we get to highlight and elevate, celebrate women of influence and culture changing women who are shaping our world in so many different ways. And so We've worked with female founders like Allie Webb, who is, one of the founders of Dry Bar. And we've worked with Mandana Dayani, who is one of the founders of I Am a Voter, and did a campaign with her around voter registration and awareness. We've worked with Cleo Wade, who is an author and a poet. And so for us, it's been this really cool way of expressing our admiration for these women and creating visibility to some of the work that they do amongst our audience of members, and that at the same time understanding what reaching a new audience could look like for us through those partnerships. So Leading with Style has been this really fun extension of what is already a really robust and I think exciting influencer strategy, but we really wanted to take a different angle on it and really think about how do you further dimensionalize the women that we work with and that we champion. And I think they very much reflect the modern values that we believe in. And I think they reflect where the culture is going. In many cases, as I mentioned, they're driving those changes. And so yeah, that's a little bit about it. And we've been doing it on a monthly basis since we launched almost a year ago in August. And now that we're coming up on 1 year, really thinking about how do we evolve it and where does it go next?
Well, it's fantastic to be able to integrate your values, and use your platform for that. And earlier you had mentioned, you've mentioned influencers and the impact that has on your business. And you mentioned you looking at the data of the different social channels you use and these investments. And I'm wondering how you're using data to figure out, how you bring those channels in and the influencers and how that drives your product, how that drives some of these partnerships that you're deciding to do. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say there.
Sure. Yeah. So I think when I think about channel, I'll start there. I mean, we have an incredible, I talked a little bit about our data analytics team. They have built like nothing I've ever seen. And I have worked at some really incredible companies and brands, and what they have built in the form of our in-house view of the world of media and analytics and attribution. Obviously, is very much changing right now, but has afforded us an opportunity to be very clear by channel what our targets are. When we think about customer acquisition, when we think about where we're seeing highest LTV, where we're seeing, maybe there's a velocity of conversion rates that are happening, but the profile of the customer looks a little bit different. What are they, activating on? What does their first purchase look like? And on average, what is the value of it? And looking at that by channel. So we're able to have that view, and as a result, continue to be really focused and surgical about who the right storytellers are for the right platform. What is the message that they're really going to focus on? What's the merchandise that we may want them to highlight? When we think about too, with the brand ambassadors we work with, I mean, they're incredible with just giving you first feedback on merch, right? So we give them the opportunity to, within a selected amount of assortment, make selections for what they're excited about, what they want to try, what they want to experience themselves. I mean, we're all consumers at the end of the day as well. And so even their picks are information on where the customer might be, where the audience might be, and might gravitate towards them. We do some polling as well in social, mostly in Instagram, but that's such a very real-time reaction to what you have. And so we have a few months lead time as well on that, right? So we take what their top selects are and we share that back with our merchandising team so that they can think about chase and they can think about what may be coming down the pike and what might be a hit. So we're looking at all of those things to understand and inform where we may need to go next, and to the extent that we can, be quick enough to respond to the customer demand. But by channel, as I mentioned, we're able to have that view, and that's where we start. And we say, where are we doing well? Where do we have points of friction? Where are we seeing that maybe the customer isn't spending as much when she's coming in, and maybe for her this is very much that first trial, and we've got to figure out what the follow-up is as we, get that second purchase from her. So yeah, it's we have an incredible team on the in-house media front who do the buying and really help us with real-time optimization and strategy. Our acquisition team obviously really focused on strategy, testing framework, what goes where, when, and then the broader marketing organization sort of having our arms around all of those efforts to ensure that hopefully we're telling really good stories, along the way and in the process.
Right, that's fascinating. And I'd love to talk a little bit about LTV, but I did want to invite the audience to ask any questions in the Q&A box. We do have some time at the end for some live questions. Daria, I'm sorry, you'd mentioned that you mentioned LTV a couple times. Mm-hmm. I'd love to know how you, without giving away any trade secrets, how are you defining lifetime value? Because so many businesses really treat it differently, and I'd love to kind of understand how you're measuring that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would hope that most businesses, to some extent, are thinking at the most basic level around, their average order value and how do you continue to extract value, what's the potential headroom you have there in terms of their willingness to spend with you, whether it's their first purchase or their fifth purchase, right? Which kind of leads us into the second piece of LTV, which is just frequency, right? And how do you increase frequency? And, we having a membership model and a monthly flow does certainly help think about frequency, but we also have an incredibly flexible model so the customer can skip the month if she wants. She doesn't have to shop, right? So how do we increase her frequency? Of course, for how long, right? And so for what duration, what does a lifetime look like for that particular customer? And hopefully all of that to the end goal of increased margin, because, if you have a more loyal customer who, has defensible brand enthusiasm, then you can be hopefully a little bit less promotional. You can think about offering her more value, him or her more value, in the ways that may feel a little bit less tangible, and maybe it's not just rooted in the core offering that you have from your, your assortment. So, I think on the whole, that's how we think about LTV. Obviously, within each business, you're going to have nuances that you'll probably, be focusing on a little bit more, maybe a little bit less.
Right. Thank you. Jason came and went, so I'm assuming we still have our time for questions. And we did get some questions in here. There's a couple questions about partnerships. I'll combine these two. If you could partner with a dream brand, who would you choose, and who do you look for or avoid in a potential partnership?
Ooh, so
that's a juicy one.
That's a great combo of questions. I'll actually start with things that we seek to avoid. I think inauthenticity is the first thing. We spend as much time as we possibly can thinking about alignment in values, in the customer base, the customer experience, and where those strengths, together can form exponential impact and create exponential impact, right? So any partner that doesn't jive with that inherently is something that we seek to avoid. I think it's interesting in this landscape because when you talk about the world of celebrity or influencers, anyone who has a public image, there's always going to be risk associated with it. You just don't know what people are going to do or what may happen in their lives. And so when we think about partnership from that perspective, I mean, it starts with their team and, the quality of experiences we have with their team. Sometimes it's really simple stuff. Are they responsive? Are they thoughtful? Do they give you great feedback? Are they asking you great questions that's showing an investment in the business? I mean, to just do a pay to play, which can be valuable, is unfortunately, the level of effort that goes into these things, requires so much. So we really want to be able to feel good about going into partnership with someone and that they feel good about that from us. And then the last thing, obviously, is you want to try to avoid anybody who won't perform well, which is the thing that can be the most challenging to ascertain. I think on the dream front, I'm going to tackle this in, and I hope maybe an interesting way. I think one of the things that would be super cool that's been on my mind lately is potentially working with Netflix. So many of you may know that they've recently launched a shopping site, and they've been, I think, exploring fashion in curious ways over the past, maybe year, definitely, I would say, last 6 to 9 months, when you think about some of the shows that are coming out and the way some of those shows are informing the culture, and again, informing fashion. And how might there be this very interesting intersection? And I think as brands are collapsing content marketing and thinking about creating content in different ways, I don't know, I think that could be super cool. So I think that would be a really, really dope partnership, actually, to
Absolutely.
big.
And just the reach alone is really fun.
Well,
And
for sure. That's always great. So if anyone from Netflix is listening, call me.
Yeah, I don't know if we have them in the audience, but that you just gave your pitch, Daria. There's another question about developing your team and thinking about the skills that you want your marketing team to have. What is an area of focus that you would like your team to work on this year?
I deeply, deeply believe in strengths-based leadership. So it does start there for me, because I don't know that you can always assemble the perfect team that has everything that you're looking for, that every person fills someone else's gaps. And I think that at our core, we all want to do great work and add value in a way that's, coming from a place of expression of our highest and best, right? And so if you start there and you really lean into people's strengths, I do think that you can get magic out of that. And I think you can get outcomes that feel, for example, you might have somebody who is incredibly good at influencing other people, and they're very much centered on how they can amplify the work that's being done on the team. And so maybe they're not leading with a strategic thinking point of view, but their ability to gain resources or gain attention or focus or priority on the work, right? That is still a strategic goal, and you may get something out of that. So I do really start there. I think, of course, curiosity is so important. The world is moving so quickly. The customer is moving so quickly. I've built a career on an obsession with how people behave and how we tell stories that feel meaningful. And so I definitely want a team that values that, but who can also just really, see what's happening and come up with ideas. I believe deeply in creating a culture where people know that it's okay to fail. And that can be scary, that can be hard. I think this past year was especially difficult for that. But it's really important to me that I have a culture where people know that that's the case. And managing managers, and coaching managers who have to manage people, especially when you think about the new generation of managers coming in, many of them for the first time. How do you up-level them and really ensure that they understand that, yes, there's a functional part of your role where there are deliverables, and equally important and part of your job is all of the administrative stuff that comes with leading people. And this isn't the thing that you also have to do when you get to it. It's part of the gig. So I think that's something that we spend a lot of time on. I think especially this year, I just really want my teams to know and feel and be able to execute ruthless prioritization, because everybody tried to do a lot of things last year. We were a part of that. We're moving back into the world in different ways and back into our offices in different ways. And I think it's time to be really clear about what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, what are the non-goals, and setting them aside so that people can hopefully reclaim some balance between, their personal lives and selves and their professional lives and selves. It's really important to me.
I just had that conversation this morning with my manager. And I love the strengths-led leadership, because I've always had my teams do strengths finders, the Gallup poll, because it's so helpful to know not just what your own strengths are, but what your teammates' strengths are too. So
yeah, it's one of my favorite tools, hands down.
For sure. So as we wrap up, and we talked about this year and what you want to focus on for your team. What do you think the future of the future when you're focusing on inspiration for JustFab, and what is the thing that you're really driving for?
We have a lot happening in the back half of the year. I'm really excited about how our visual identity and the work that we've been doing there will be received out in the world when it launches, and doing that with some really exciting partners and sort of new storytellers to represent the brand. So that's really exciting. And I think continuing to keep an eye out on how e-commerce is evolving and the ways in which we can continue to innovate there. I can't say a ton, but I think we're very much thinking about digital experiences that continue to afford us a competitive advantage and allow us to do interesting things that hopefully really add value to our customers.
That's fantastic. I know I've signed up, so I will be watching, and really appreciate you taking the time, Daria.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I heard this at the conclusion of the last discussion too. I was saying to a neighbor of mine, it's just nice to see people's smiles, out in public. Again, it's really been overwhelming how meaningful that's been, just to get on the elevator and smile at someone and see them smile back. So I look forward to more of that too. And, hopefully a smooth but deliberate and intentional transition back out into the world. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much though.
Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you, Daria. I apologize for calling you Daria at the beginning. So
that's okay. Since I'm 5, I have been on the Daria tour.
Well, yeah, you both were just fab, let me tell you, and a great way to round out what was an amazing day 3 of Brand Innovators Cannes 2021. And I really welcome everyone to join us again tomorrow. We're going to get back at it at 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time, 8:20 Pacific. We have a heavy hitter lineup as well. PepsiCo, Crocs, Square, Applebee's, Artsy, Sperry, Monster Energy, and many, many more. Wow, what a day. Thursday, June 24th, tomorrow. Register if you have not done so already. Please come back and join us and hear some awesome senior leaders like Daria provide their thought leadership on marketing and innovation. Thank you, Jeanne, for delivering this final panel for us. And thank you to our audience. And we will see everyone tomorrow. Have a good day.